It's time to move forward. Resolutions for a better retirement. In this episode, I'm going to show you how you can resolve to be able to have a better retirement and not outlive your money. My name's Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist for more than now 46 years. I'm in my 47th year. I'm in my radio studio right now, and I've had the opportunity to air a national show. This is my 12th year, but I love to educate people like you, and I've helped many people make proper choices and avoid mistakes that I've seen thousands of people make in America in particular with their retirement savings. We talk about every year, especially at the beginning of a year, New Year's resolutions. And so I always teach my audiences how to do SMART goals. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and in a time frame. But there's no better time than to resolve to have a better retirement. But it shocks me how many people in America spend more time planning their summer vacations or a weekend in Moab, in Utah where I live. That's where all the four-wheelers go and the hikers. But they'll spend more time planning a weekend than they do their entire futures. So I want you to resolve to have a better retirement. And the best way to do that is to realize how to correct mistakes before it's too late. So let me share with you one of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make. They usually would come to me as they approached retirement, and I wish I could have prevented the tax problems they've created years before, but if I were a physician, I've probably spent most of my career curing tax disease, okay, instead of preventing it. So what's the problem? A lot of people, I think they put their head in the sand, I feel, and they just followed the crowd, the herd. Oh, just put your money in a tax-deferred account like the company's 401k or an IRA. You'll be in a lower bracket when you retire. And so when they come and I do this analysis, I developed software. I think it's still the only software on the planet that actually shows somebody the darkness of the night, so to speak, if they keep deferring their money in a tax-deferred IRA or 401k and keep it in those vehicles all through retirement, how much tax they're going to pay over the long haul. Versus what if you just got the taxes over and done with sooner than later and reposition that money into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. In fact, they would have been way better off starting out that way. But let's talk about curing the problem. If you're watching this and you have money accumulated, what I call trapped in a traditional yet-to-be-taxed IRA or 401k, you're headed for a big tax surprise. I would strongly recommend that you resolve to get the money out. Now, you've got to do it with the best wisdom. So we call these strategic rollouts or a strategic conversion of money from a traditional IRA or 401k into something that's going to be tax-free. My favorite vehicle for tax-free is a maximum funded tax-advantaged insurance contract where I've averaged the last 25 years over 10% rate of return annually, but it's tax-free. Now, it's been grandfathered under the Internal Revenue Code. I teach that in other episodes. What happens is when we get money out of an IRA or 401k, we're going to have to subject that to tax. This is not a rollover. See, a rollover is going from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. If you just roll over money from a 401k into an IRA, you're continuing to defer the tax. You're not saving tax. And when people would actually see the amount of tax that they would pay if they continued to defer until, let's say, age 70 and a half is what the rule had been for years. Now, as the recording of this episode, you can take until age 72. But at age 72, if you do not start taking money out of your tax-deferred IRAs or 401ks based upon the government's life expectancy formula, okay, if you don't start withdrawing that, what's the penalty? 50%. If you're supposed to pull out $50,000 and you don't, the penalty's $25,000, plus you have to pay tax on the whole $50,000. Folks, they want that money out and taxed before you die, and then they'll tax you again when you do die on anything you leave behind. But see, required minimum distributions say that you must pull money out every year because the government wants to tax that. They've been planning on that tax revenue. What's the solution? Why should you do this? Why should you do a strategic roll out instead of a rollover? Watch. So a strategic roll out is a term that I coined. You won't find it probably anywhere else, but this is where you're not rolling the money over. You're going to roll it out, but you have to do it strategically. It's actually a three-part process that I developed years ago. And if you listen closely, you're going to understand why I've helped thousands of people save $250,000, $500,000. One couple last year, a physician and his wife, we saved $1.2 million of unnecessary tax that they were going to shell out unnecessarily if they kept their money in their IRAs and 401ks and kept deferring and taking out the required minimum distribution. Starting at age 72 is what the age is now. And so those are called RMDs. It's the worst advice I've ever heard, but we have to get the money out and the tax over and done with sooner than later. Now, whenever I show people this, they sort of gasp like, what? You just took us into a higher bracket. Well, no, actually, we strategically show people, hey, you'll never be in a lower bracket than this, so let's get the money out and the tax is over and done with. There's actually thresholds. And sometimes in the Internal Revenue Code, the thresholds between one tax bracket and the next tax bracket, a 22 to a 25, or a 25% bracket to, let's say, a 27 or 28, or to a 33, there's like sometimes $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of room that if you took that out, you wouldn't pay any more tax. But if you don't use the room, you lose it. So the first part of the strategy is we strategically look at how much money we want to get out in today's tax rates rather than thinking tomorrow's are going to be lower, because that just isn't true. You roll out sometimes $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. You get the taxes over and done with. Now people say, well, I don't need the money. What does that have to do with it? You don't have to spend the money. Well, where am I going to put it? Tax-free vehicles. So the second part of the strategy is you take the money out, you get the taxes taken care of sooner than later, and then you reposition the after-tax monies into vehicles that will be tax-free from now on. Now even CPAs go, what's tax-free? Well, my favorite vehicle is called the Laser Fund. And it's been tax-free for over 100 years, and it's the only vehicle in the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to accumulate money tax-free and access it tax-free. And when you finally pass away, guess what? It blossoms and increases in value tax-free. Every million in my laser funds, I have several, would blossom to $2.5 million if I died right now. So that's what I do. In fact, when I finally pass away, it reimburses my family, my spouse, my children with far more money than I actually paid in tax. So at the end of the day, we're not out anything. So the key is you want to get the money out, taxes over and done with sooner than later. You want to reposition that money into something that's going to be tax-free from now on. I recommend my favorite vehicle is called the Laser Fund. And if you watch this episode here, you'll understand what this book talks about. And you can get a free copy of this. But my Laser Fund is what allows me to accumulate my money tax-free from now on. And then it blossoms when I pass away. Now, there is a third part of the strategy, and that's to offset some or all of the tax by doing tax planning. Many times I've helped many people resurrect tax deductions they were sort of killing by paying off their rental income properties or paying off their house. And we resurrect that and we end up creating all kinds of new deductions. Plus we make about 100 to 500% rates of return in the process. And people go, what? Watch some of my other episodes to understand how to do that. But this is the key. You want to reposition your serious cash as soon as you can, that's the resolution, and get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. Reposition into something tax-free from now on, and then if you can offset the tax with new deductions, I can show you how to do that. But these are called strategic rollouts. It's probably my favorite strategy, and there are actual stories of how to do that in the book, The Laser Fund. The story side is the flip side. So watch this episode and you'll see how you can get a free copy of this book.